It gives us great pleasure to welcome all of you this evening to an evening of celebration and recognition. And I know you will be inspired by the events that occur tonight and by all of our inductees. Tonight, we will recognize 11 outstanding women as new inductees to the National Women's Hall of Fame. We are pleased to welcome back as our MC a Rochester native and award-winning reporter, Jenny Ryan. In addition to anchoring one of the top television stations in Rochester and raising a family, Jenny Ryan finds time to serve on the board of CMAC and Heritage Christian Services Foundation. She is also a member of the Public Relations Committee of Wilson Commencement Park. We are pleased to have her again here tonight. Please give a warm welcome to this evening's Master of Ceremonies, Miss Jenny Ryan.
It is my pleasure and honor to join all of you here tonight again for the induction ceremony. As a wife and a mother, I find the work of the Hall especially personal and meaningful, and that is why I am so delighted to be a part of this celebration tonight. Now, it's my honor to share the stories of this year's distinguished inductees. Tonight's first inductee, Sister Katharine Drexel, was born into a prominent family in Philadelphia and was taught the importance of philanthropy from a young age. Although her own mother died when Katharine was small, her father remarried, and together with his wife and family, they shared their wealth and resources with those in need. As a teen teaching Sunday school in Pennsylvania, Katharine was introduced to Reverend James O'Connor, who became her spiritual director and an important figure in her life. Reverend O'Connor introduced Katharine to the terrible conditions faced by Native Americans in the area and urged her to start a congregation that could address the needs of this population. After much prayer, Katharine founded the Sisters of the Blessed Sacrament in 1891, working directly with Native Americans and African Americans. Katharine and her order founded over 60 missions and schools. Saint Katharine was beatified in 1988 and eventually canonized by Pope John Paul II on, fittingly, October 1st, 2000. For her faithful philanthropy, sacrifice, and service to others, St. Katharine Drexel is now inducted into the National Women's Hall of Fame. Accepting for Sister Katharine Drexel is Sister Patricia Sahalski, President of the Sisters of the Blessed Sacrament.
In the name of the Sisters of the Blessed Sacrament, and in the name of all the peoples, especially in the Black and Native American communities of our country and Haiti, whose lives have been touched and empowered by her mission for a more just and faithful society, I say thank you for this tremendous honor. As I reflected earlier this week on what to say, I did so in a prayerful mode, asking Katharine Drexel to guide the words I would share. Hopefully, my words reflect what her heart would want us to know at this time. If Katharine Drexel were living today, I believe she would accept this honor for only one reason, and that is if in doing so, it would draw attention to the mission of justice for the poor, especially among the Black and Native American peoples in our society today. The best way we honor anyone is by imitating their example. For that reason, she would accept this honor if her example would inspire others who hear her story to walk the talk for justice at this time in our history. Katharine and her two sisters, Elizabeth and Louise, received the example of faith, justice, and generosity from their parents. Francis Anthony Drexel, a millionaire banker, and Emma Bouvier Drexel. They taught their daughters by word and deed that the money they had was not only for their own use, but to use it somehow to help others to make this world a better place. Their parents taught by example the equality of all people before God, regardless of race, creed, color, or economic status. That example inspired Katharine and her sisters for life. We can never underestimate the power of an example in our lives and our responsibility to set examples for the future generations. Katharine, in accepting this honor, would reiterate that she was able to accomplish much because of her wealth. She would share that her greatest wealth, though, was not in the material possessions that pass away. Rather, her richness was rooted in the grace she received early in life, the grace by which she sensed a deeper meaning to life. This deeper meaning was rooted in an unwavering faith in God, who was the source and foundation of all she was able to accomplish for God's mission of justice. Katharine was a leader and a businesswoman who understood the importance of knowledge and education in the lives of all people, but especially in the lives of those who are poor and oppressed because of injustices and discrimination in society. She knew that education, the role it plays in the empowerment of all peoples. Over the course of 120 years, her example of passion for justice and passion for God was so compelling that over 800 women became Sisters of the Blessed Sacrament, making, as she did, a total gift of self to God for the sake of God and to the mission of justice. Today, there are over 130 Sisters of the Blessed Sacrament and more than 400 lay associates of the Sisters of the Blessed Sacrament who daily live this passion for God and passion for justice. On her left hand, she wore a simple silver ring, which she received, like every Sister of the Blessed Sacrament does, when we profess our perpetual vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience. The motto she chose to have inscribed in her ring was a verse from the Song of Songs, "My beloved to me, and I to him." Her motto describes well the intimate relationship she had with her God, who was the motivating force of her life. Katharine wrote, as she rode on the train after visiting on the Navajo reservation, "I looked up in wonder at God's wonderful ways and thought how little we imagine what may be the result of listening and acting on a desire he puts into the heart. If he puts it into the heart, he will bless it. If we try to act upon it, great will be the effect before God, even if it be not so to our weak understanding. Nourish before him great desires." Katharine herself was a tremendous listener to the voice of God, especially in the cries of the poor. Coincidentally, and was mentioned a few minutes ago, maybe not so coincidentally, Katharine received the title of saint by Pope John Paul II in St. Peter's Square on October the 1st, 11 years ago today. The title was the result of 2 medically documented cures. Both of those cures involved the ability to listen. As they dealt with the restoration of hearing of 2 children who experienced partial or complete deafness prior to their cures. Their parents and family members, through prayer, had sought the intercession of Katharine for their children's condition. Katharine's counsel to listen and act fittingly describes the lives of all the women, past, present here tonight, and future recipients, who are part of the National Women's Hall of Fame. Each has listened in the silence of her heart and acted on desires to make this world a better place. We see the results and thank them for their examples to us. When Katharine Drexel was dying, she said to the sister who was with her, "Do you see them, sister?" And the sister responded, "See who?" And Katharine said, "The children, sister, the children. They just keep coming." Our society today is filled with children who just keep coming. May we, through the example of Katharine Drexel and all those who are part of the National Women's Hall of Fame, honor them by continually striving for justice that will enable all peoples in our global village to live and experience their dignity as God's children. Thank you very much.
And thank you, Sister Sahalski, a philanthropist who spent her life making others' lives better. Dorothy Harrison Eustis married her love of animals and her penchant for service to co-found the nation's very first dog guide school, the Seeing Eye. In 1921, after her husband's death, Eustis moved to Switzerland, where she started an experimental breeding kennel for dogs. She and her second husband bred German Shepherds at their estate, Fortunate Fields. While still in Switzerland, Eustis learned of a school that taught dogs to act as guides for blind war veterans. She wrote an article about the school entitled The Seeing Eye, which ran in the Saturday Evening Post. After the article ran, Eustis received many letters, including one from a blind American man named Morris Frank. Frank wrote to request a guide dog of his own, and Eustis invited him to Switzerland, where she gave him a dog. Frank returned to the United States, as did Eustis shortly thereafter. Together, in 1929, they founded the Seeing Eye to train guide dogs in the United States and open up the world to the visually impaired. Since its inception, the Seeing Eye has provided nearly 8,000 people with canine companions. For her remarkable vision and civic passion, Dorothy Harrison Eustis is now inducted into the National Women's Hall of Fame. Accepting induction for Dorothy Harrison Eustis is Sylvie Myers, Senior Philanthropic Advisor to the Seeing Eye.
Good evening. It wasn't until the age of 41 that Dorothy Harrison Eustis wrote the words that would become her life's work. Indeed, she was asked to write some words about her work in Switzerland with German Shepherds and the way she was training them. So while she lived in Switzerland, she wrote an article that did not exactly concern her very direct work, but something that she had observed in Germany of dogs that were guiding blind veterans of the First World War. The article, which she called the Seeing Eye after a Bible verse, which was very important to her, led to her meeting with Morris Frank. And Morris Frank was himself an extraordinary personality. He was from Tennessee. He had become blind as a result of a couple of accidents, but he was a very high energy, wonderful personality, and these two would really become a very, very strong team. Mrs. Eustis served as the Seeing Eye's first president until 1940, and then she served as a member of the Board of Trustees until 1946. Sadly, she died at the age of 60 of breast cancer. I would guess that all of you have heard of the Seeing Eye. It is indeed an extraordinary organization. And you might have heard the name of Morris Frank, but I doubt most of you have ever heard the name of Dorothy Harrison Eustis until tonight. This is a woman who did not like to be in the forefront. And actually, she left a legacy with us at our school in Morristown, in New Jersey. We have a portrait of Mrs. Eustis showing her at the age of 6 in riding clothes. She too came from Philadelphia, by the way. And she chose that picture because, as she wrote, it is not a big, busted old dowager who looks down her nose at what she has done, but a child in her riding habit, which denotes the youth of the organization, which is what we want to stand for today. And so instead of a current portrait of herself at age 50-something, showing what she had accomplished, she chose a portrait of herself at the age of 6 years old to show that the Seeing Eye and what the Seeing Eye could become. It was a typical gesture from a woman who did prefer to be behind the scenes. And I can tell you that if she were to be next to me today, she would probably elbow me in the ribs, telling me not to speak of her, but to speak of the Seeing Eye. Not every guide dog that you see is a Seeing Eye. A Seeing Eye dog is a registered trademark of our organization because our dogs, we consider them very special, and they go through a very special training. People come to the Seeing Eye from across the United States and Canada to be trained with one of those remarkable dogs. Since 1929, we have graduated more than 15,000 guide dog teams, and each of them is an amazing success story, and all of that began with Dorothy Harrison Eustis. Today, every month, 12 times a year, we welcome a new class of approximately 24 students who remain on campus for 4 weeks to learn to be matched with their dog and to learn how to work with them before they go home. We have many graduates, as we refer to them, who come back after 7 years when their dogs retire. And for example, the president of the Seeing Eye, who himself is blind, is now it's dog number 7, whose name is Colby. But I would like to leave you with a story that in many ways says what we do at the Seeing Eye and what makes the work of Dorothy Harrison Eustis so very special. This story involves a trustee who was on campus and saw a woman crying. So he approached her, very concerned, trying to find out how he could help. And this woman said, I just saw my daughter walking with her dog. My daughter is blind. She's been blind for many years. And for all of these years, she has been walking around with her head down like this. And today, she is comfortable with her dog, and now she's going out feeling comfortable, confident, and I know she got her dignity back and her independence. And that is what the Seeing Eye is all about. This is our mission. This is what we continue to do today. And we all all of it to Dorothy Harrison Eustis. So thank you for including her, inducting her in this wonderful National Hall of Women's Hall of Fame, I'm sorry. It has been an extraordinary experience to be here with you since yesterday, and we are immensely proud to be part of it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Myers. Our next inductee is a woman who has truly transformed the profession of nursing, and in doing so, has revolutionized patient care and understanding. After graduating from college, Dr. Loretta C. Ford began work as a nurse. She went on to hold several roles within the Boulder City County Health Department in Colorado, as well as teaching positions at the University of Colorado Schools of Nursing. In 1961, she earned her doctorate in education. Through her work, Dr. Ford discovered that a shortage of primary care physicians in the community had led to a lack of health care for children and families. In 1965, in partnership with Henry K. Silver, Dr. Ford created and implemented the first ever pediatric nurse practitioner model and training program. In addition to instruction in clinical care, the program also taught nurse practitioners to include social, psychological, environmental, and economic conditions into patient care plans. The program was a national success. And in 1972, Dr. Ford was recruited as the founding dean at the University of Rochester, yay, School of Nursing, where she implemented the unification model. This model provided a complete approach to nursing through the combination of clinical practice, education, and research. Today, approximately 140,000 nurse practitioners are providing care across the country, and close to 9,000 new nurse practitioners are trained each and every year. For changing healthcare paradigms and in turn changing lives, you, Dr. Loretta C. Ford, are now inducted into the National Women's Hall of Fame.
Thank you. And thank you to the board and to our president and to all who participated in this amazing event. It is with gratitude and humility that I address you this evening, and some wonder. Indeed, I feel like an imposter among these marvelous inductees and honored guests and distinguished people here for accepting this prestigious award. It's an award that's been earned by so many others, about these 140,000 nurse practitioners, over 250,000 advanced practice nurses in our country, 3 million nurses around the country, and even more in foreign services. And I'm even more grateful, too, to my family, friends, colleagues, and students. Many are here tonight, and I want to add this award really honors all of you as well as those I mentioned, and I do thank you. In particular, I want to thank my husband of 44 years. Did I say 44? I'm slipping. I meant 64. Sorry, Bill. It just seemed like a few years. This poor man has dozed through more academic performances, consumed more cream chicken, hosted more student, faculty, and fundraising parties than anyone in this room. And he's done it with grace and dignity and generosity. And thank you, Bill, and thank you for our daughter, Valerie. My hosts have requested some comments about my life and my aspirations and motivations as well as the influential role models that have helped shape my values and eventually a long career. So essentially, these comments are a reflection of my personal values, the impacts and inspirations of individuals and institutions, and the opportunities of the social times. I was born in the year that women got the vote, and I still consider this an ongoing struggle. And I was destined to join the Great Generation, though both of these were news to me at the time. One thing I acquired early in life was a commitment to social justice, and within that the rights to education and health care. These values were instilled in me by my father. He was a European-trained, skilled artisan, and his mantra was, everyone should go to school and be trained for a trade. Early, I chose teaching as my trade. Even as a young child, I remember playing teacher. I used to wave a ruler in front of imaginary classes and I'm sure it was trying to gain some measure of control. I was a middle child of 7, and believe me, I had it coming and going. Unfortunately, finances dictated that to be educated, I first had to be trained. So I entered the militaristic environment of the early hospital training school. Throughout my career, since my first grade teacher, Mrs. Reed, found something in me that I only discovered in later years, teachers throughout my school years to the professors and universities have been my role models. It was they who raised my aspirations and challenging, inspirational, and motivational encouragement. My family, patients, colleagues, and students in less formal teaching relationships have also created and contributed greatly to my learning and to the value and the quality and enjoyment of my life and that of my family too. And many are here tonight to celebrate this auspicious occasion with me. My values for education and the institutions that house it have been major drivers in my endeavors. There's a campaign slogan that describes my beliefs, and it reads, "Education is priceless. The benefits are endless." That has been my experience, and I owe the federal government for the opportunity to engage to assume the benefits of the GI Bill of Rights. Well, it was a Bill of Rights for me. I escaped from the Army. And a National League for Nursing Fellowship for their support, and other nursing organizations that were mentioned tonight in achieving the endless benefits of both my university education and participation in professional organizations. Both as a student and a faculty member, I received these benefits. Further, I believe in paying back those institutions which I owe so much. And my husband and I do this by supporting students along the educational continuum. Just remember the old adage, he who gives while he lives always knows where it goes. So you can support. This is a good clue for supporting the National Women's Hall of Fame. Anyway, I found my niche en route to my childhood dream of teaching through nursing practice and nursing education and leadership. Nursing education provided the opportunities and the environments to live out my beliefs in social justice and rights that extend to education and health as basic human rights accompanied by individual responsibility. To me, investment in human capital through an educated and healthy populace pays high dividends in national security, economic prosperity, individual fulfillment, cultural advancement, and peace. Upon review, I achieved my childhood dream to be a teacher, and my passion and love of caring for others through nursing leadership also provided that avenue, because these avenues offered me a life of fulfillment and challenging learning experiences. The Chief Justice, the late Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, Earl Warren, comment mirrors my life. He said, "Everything I did in life that was worthwhile, I caught hell for." For my passion to bring improved health care to people through changes in nursing and healthcare delivery, I found that. Still, I have been kicked and kissed, reviled and revered, cursed and credited. Still, what you see is what you get. I have not been Botoxed or detoxed. I am Loretta Ford, and I approve this message.
I think your political campaign just began, Dr. Ford. Dr. Ford, for something, we don't know, but something. Thank you. Go where least wanted, for there you are most needed. Abby Kelley Foster lived this motto and in turn led the demand for equality at a time when it was severely lacking. Foster was raised a Quaker during a period when women were expected to be silent, obedient, and submissive. Foster would not succumb to these expectations, but rather joined the Female Anti-Slavery Society and became a national delegate to the first Anti-Slavery Convention of American Women in 1837. Foster left a career in teaching to found the Millbury Anti-Slavery Society. For over 20 years, she lectured, raised money, recruited, and organized in the fights for both abolition and suffrage. In 1850, Foster helped plan the first National Women's Rights Convention held in Worcester, Massachusetts. At that convention, she delivered a passionate speech imploring that women demand both the responsibilities and privileges of equality. In 1868, Foster was one of the organizers of the founding convention of the New England Women's Suffrage Association, and her work was critically important to the ratification of the 14th, 15th, and 19th Amendments. For lifting her voice on behalf of the silent and the disenfranchised, Abby Kelley Foster is now inducted into the National Women's Hall of Fame. Accepting induction for Abby Kelley Foster is Worcester Women's History Project representative Lynn McKenney-Leidick.
Sisters and brothers, I most humbly accept this honor, but I do so while acknowledging the people who remain unnamed, who did as much for the abolition of slavery and for the equal rights of women as I. I accept in honor of their memory and with great gratitude for their sacrifices. As a woman, I was supposed to be silent, submissive, and obedient. I was none of these. Would I be here now had I been so? Would any of us? Often I think back on the struggles and the hardships I endured as a female lecturer for the American Anti-Slavery Society. In 1839, it was unheard of. It was radical for a woman to travel alone around the country and give speeches in public in front of audiences of both women and men, or worse yet, to be unmarried and travel in the company of men. Well, for nearly 5 years, not a single female would accompany me, well, not because they didn't believe in the cause, but because their male kinfolk would not allow it. I traveled from my home in Worcester, Massachusetts, and I crisscrossed the states. I went where I was least wanted, for there I was most needed. And at my lectures and in print, I was called every name imaginable: traitor, infidel, man-woman, Jezebel. Newspaper accounts of my speeches were often interrupted by descriptions of my dress, my hair, my complexion, and my demeanor, and my declaration that women are just as capable to lead as men, and yes, even to be president, brought harassment and ridicule beyond the pale. In 1843, a full 5 years before the Women's Rights Convention, I was here in Seneca Falls, shaking it up. I was credited with causing the women to think of their lives as not much different than that of the slaves, and thereby setting the stage for the convention. Oh, I did not speak of women's rights, but of human rights, the rights of all human beings. Why, this was embodied in a resolution from the 1850 First National Women's Rights Convention held in Worcester, Massachusetts, and it read, "Equality before the law without distinction of sex or color." Why, all the great family of mankind is bound up in one bundle. When we strike a blow at our neighbor's rights, our own are by the same blow destroyed. Well, for these declarations throughout my travels and my life, I was verbally and physically harassed. But when one is in the thick of the fight, a determination arises from deep within that forces one to continue. Oh, 'tis great joy to see the world grow better in anything. Indeed, I think endeavors to improve mankind is the only object worth living for. I was called the moral Joan of Arc of the world by William Lloyd Garrison, and my dear friend Lucy Stone said the world of women owe me a debt that they can never pay, and that the movement for the equal rights of women began directly and emphatically with me, and that I have no peer and I leave no successor. Well, perhaps before tonight, many of you knew nothing of me, had never read anything about me, nor seen my likeness. But we share the same history. We, all of us, are Abby Kelleyites, women who do not know their place. Oh, I think now, though I sought it not, that I shall be remembered. And I thank again this fine institution for this recognition. But in reality, could there ever be a hall large enough to recognize all the spirits of the great women, the multitude that cannot be numbered? But I did not rise to make a speech. My life has been my speech. Bloody feet, sisters, Bloody feet have worn smooth the path by which you have come up hither. In the bonds of sisterhood, I thank you.
A pioneer in the healthcare field, Helen Murray Free forever changed the diagnosis and treatment of diabetes with her groundbreaking discoveries. Originally intending to study English and Latin in college, Free changed her mind when she discovered that women were being encouraged to study scientific fields while the men were away serving in World War II. In fact, Free graduated from Worcester College with a bachelor's degree in chemistry. Free began work at Miles Laboratories, later acquired by Bayer. During her tenure at Miles, Free met and married biochemist Alfred Free. Together, the Frees revolutionized the field of medical diagnostics, and in doing so, changed or saved countless lives around the globe. Early work focused on the Clini test, which was a tablet to measure glucose levels in urine. From there, the Frees developed acid test. However, the culmination of their research was the development of the Clini sticks, the first ever dip and read test strips for monitoring glucose in urine. Free, who holds 7 patents, continues to advocate strongly on behalf of science education, specifically for young women and underprivileged students. For your lifetime of curiosity, knowledge, and discovery, you, Helen Murray Free, are now inducted into the National Women's Hall of Fame.
I am deeply honored to be inducted into the National Women's Hall of Fame, and thank you, thank you. All 5 of my daughters, a granddaughter, a daughter-in-law, are here to help celebrate tonight, and I'd like you to meet them. My youngest is Nina, whose name indicates that she is her father's 9th child. Nina left the rat race of industrial marketing, and now she teaches others how to do it in a local community college. Ask her about the month she divided her time between company headquarters in Arizona and California with a newborn baby. Bonnie is called Bonnie because of my Scottish heritage, and also because her father left for a scientific meeting the day after she was born. She has her own financial analysis company, and it all started with a Chicago Tribune paper route. Penny was born on February 12th, so she's our Lincoln Penny. She's executive vice president of Teros, a social agency in Phoenix. And Penny's daughter, Eliza, is also here. She is a junior at Ironwood High School in Glendale, Arizona. Jane has taught hundreds of 5th graders in the Philadelphia area. She's the one with the broken foot, and she's revisiting the area in New York State where she and her husband, Dick, had made many trips with her son to Boy Scout camp. Barb is a retired nutritionist who worked for the Michigan State Department of Health and directed the nutritional program for all the children with disabilities throughout the whole state. And Cheryl, my daughter-in-law, is representing my 4 sons. She is a retired science teacher, and she drove from southern Florida, picked me up on the way, and will take me back to Florida with her tomorrow. I'm so glad you're all here. curiosity is important, especially in science. If you're looking for something, you will frequently find something very difficult from what you expected. Some call it luck, some call it fate. I call it serendipity. The dictionary defines serendipity as an apparent aptitude for making fortunate discoveries accidentally. I believe I'm very serendipitous. As you heard, I went to the College of Worcester in September of '41, prepared to be a Latin and English teacher. My role model was my English teacher, Miss Johnson. I had no intention of marrying and having a family. I was going to be a career girl. The career choices then were teacher, nurse, or secretary. In December, the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor, and at dinner one evening, the house mother was discussing the fact that all the guys were leaving to join the Army or Navy or Air Force, and some of us girls were going to have to take their places in science. And she turned to me and asked if I was taking chemistry. I said, yes. And then she asked if I had liked it and was getting good grades. I said, yes. And she said, well, why don't you switch majors? And so I said, okay. And that was serendipity number one. Incidentally, the head of the Latin department wrote to the head of the chemistry department and said he just not could understand why this girl was giving up the marvelous world of mythology to work in a smelly old lab. So I went to college for 3 years and 2 summers and graduated in June '44 with a bachelor's in chemistry. Prepared, I thought, to make some marvelous scientific discovery. I had applied for a research fellowship at Carnegie Mellon Institute in Pittsburgh and also for a job at Miles Laboratories in Elkhart, Indiana. I hadn't heard from Carnegie Mellon, so I interviewed with Miles and took a job in the quality control lab. And a couple weeks after I had moved to Elkhart, I got a letter offering me the research fellowship at Carnegie Mellon. Serendipity number 2. Sometimes it's what you don't find. I kept bugging my supervisor to transfer me for the same thing every day, quality control, to more glamorous research. So I interviewed with the new guy from Western Reserve University who was starting a biochemistry research group. Al Free hired me, and 2 years later, I married the boss. Serendipity number 3. We worked as a team for over 50 years until his death in 2000. The main product of Miles was Alka-Seltzer, a neat, fizzy way to take aspirin. But they were going to discover at Miles a new, marvelous drug which would make $1 million. A minor product was a novel test for urine glucose using a copper-reducing reaction, but eliminating the source of heat required in the lab test. But anything in urine which was a reducing compound could give a false positive result. And a lot of medicines, particularly antibiotics, were excreted in urine as reducing substances. Just about this time, a new enzyme called glucose oxidase became available. Serendipity number 4. We got the bright idea of making a test based on glucose oxidase, which would make it specific for glucose. You added a drop of each reagent to a test tube and then a drop of urine, and if glucose was present, a color formed. And then one morning, over coffee, Al and I were talking about the procedure and how to make it more convenient. One way was to eliminate the test tube. We found that it worked to carry out the reaction on a thick filter paper. And if you dried the reagents on the paper, you could dip a strip of the reagent paper into the urine specimen and throw it away after use. Serendipity number 5. This was clinicistics, the first dip and read reagent strip. It was so easy to use that diabetics could monitor their own disease at home instead of having to go to the lab or a doctor's office to have their urine or blood tested. And it's used all over the world yet today. There were several different teams working on the research and development labs, and of course, they developed tests for other diseases. I have here a multi-sticks. This gives 10 different analyte answers in 2 minutes, a complete urinalysis. Dip and read. And the same oxidation reduction reaction could be adapted to a drop of fingertip blood to make a more accurately controlled diabetes. This is the newest model of the glucose meter. Used to be you used a milliliter or part of a teaspoonful of blood to carry out the reaction, and a big lithium-based battery operated. This is the current model. At Miles Laboratories, we were looking for a new wonder drug that would make us $1 million. And instead, we found a whole new diagnostics industry. That's a huge serendipity. And remember that curiosity is important. Remember also the words of that great philosopher, Yogi Berra. When you come to a fork in the road, take it. You'll never know what you may find.
Helen Murray-Free, congratulations. Although she passed away in 1959, our next inductee's work continues to provide both timely entertainment and inspiration. Billie Holiday is considered by many to be one of the most important jazz vocalists of all time. She triumphed over adversity and societal challenges to change the world of music forever. As a young woman, Holiday moved from Baltimore to New York and began looking for work in Harlem nightclubs. She was asked to sing at one of those clubs and quickly gained a following despite her lack of formal music training. John Hammond of Columbia Records saw Holiday perform and then organized her first recording with Benny Goodman. She made her debut at the legendary Apollo Theater in 1935 and toured with Count Basie and Artie Shaw following that debut. Holiday's collaborations with the legendary saxophonist Lester Young resulted in some of the most important jazz music ever. Her groundbreaking style and delivery once led Holiday to say, "I hate straight singing. I have to change a tune to my own way of doing it. That's all I know." As a songwriter, Holiday penned many numbers including God Bless the Child and Lady Sings the Blues, also the title of her 1956 autobiography. For her transcendent talent and unequaled song, Billie Holiday is now inducted into the National Women's Hall of Fame. Unfortunately, Mr. Craig Kay could not be here to accept on Ms. Holiday's behalf, but Beverly Ryder was going to say a few words on his behalf.
We will accept the award for Mr. McKay, and we will make sure that it gets to the family. Thank you.
not shall lose. So the Bible says, and it still is new. Mama may have, Papa may have. God bless the child that's got his own, that's got his own. Yes, the strong gets more, while the weak ones fade. Empty pockets don't ever make the grade. Mama may have, your daddy may have. God bless the child that's got his own, that's got his own. Money, you got a lot of friends crowding round your door. When the money's gone and the spending ends, they don't even come around no more. Rich relations give a crust of bread and such. You can help yourself, but baby, please don't take too much, because Mama may have, Papa may have, but God bless the child that's got his own, that's got his own.
Well, I think Billie Holiday would be pleased, don't you all? That was Edith Warmoth of the Mount Olive Missionary Baptist Church doing a lovely rendition. Thank you very much, Edith. When you are willing to make sacrifices for a great cause, you will never be alone. Those words from Coretta Scott King aptly reflect her lifelong dedication and selflessness. As the wife and partner of Martin Luther King Jr., Coretta Scott King helped ignite democracy movements worldwide. It was while in school in Boston that she met her husband. Together, the Kings produced 4 talented children and devoted their lives to social change. As a leading participant in the American Civil Rights Movement, Mrs. King recognized the importance of women to that movement. After her husband's assassination in 1968, Mrs. King devoted her time and energy to social programs, as well as to building the Martin Luther King Jr. Center for Nonviolent Social Change as a living memorial to her husband's life and his dream. In 1969, she became the founding president, chair, and chief executive officer of the King Center. For over 40 years, Mrs. King traveled the world speaking out on behalf of racial and economic justice, women's and children's rights, gay and lesbian dignity, religious freedom, and many other causes. Mrs. King lent her support to emerging democracies around the world and served as a consultant to many international leaders. For her graceful strength and courageous life, Coretta Scott King is now included in the National Women's Hall of Fame. Accepting induction for Mrs. King is her daughter, Dr. Bernice A. King.
Let me thank the National Women's Hall of Fame for this honor. And I humbly accept it along with my brothers, Martin Luther King III and Dexter Scott King, as well as my late sister, who passed away in 2007 suddenly, Yolanda Denise King. Let me also thank the young lady that nominated my mother, who is here tonight, Miss Kelley McCoy. Thank you very much. You know, my mom too had a dream, and that dream was to change the conditions for African Americans at that time, Negro or colored people in America through a career in concert singing. Obviously, we know that that was interrupted when she met the charismatic Martin Luther King Jr. with his charm. He won her over. It took a little bit of time because on their first date, he drove up, and when she saw him, she was unimpressed because he was so short. But she said as they lunched and dined together that as he talked, he grew taller and taller. And the rest was history. Once they were thrust into leadership of that movement, things changed for her. She, in fact, had to be tested very early on in terms of her devotion and commitment to the cause for freedom and justice and equality. January 30th, 1956, while my dad was at one of the mass meetings that they held in the churches in Montgomery, where they trained and taught people in nonviolent methods, a bomb exploded at the home where my mother was with my sister Yolanda. When Dad got the news, he quickly rushed home to check on his wife, as any man would. And when he got there, he was surprised about the amazing calm of our mother during that time. That night was a defining moment for her. Ladies, as you can imagine, here I am, trying to enjoy the early years of my marriage and to be faced with this kind of threat and potential harm. Early in the morning, as they were staying with some friends, a knock was heard at the door. My grandfather, my mom's dad, came to get his little girl. Said, "Coretta, I need to take you back with me until things settle down." And my mom, in her dignified and poised manner, looked at my grandfather and said, "Dad, I need to stay here with Martin." Now, most women would have probably given their husband a lot of drama. But my mother said something to me years later. She said that she had to make a decision and knew that if this movement was going to be successful, she too had to be willing to risk the loss of life. And she made that decision that night, and unfortunately made it for me as well. And so, as she continued throughout the movement, she was able to reclaim some of her dream when she gave concerts around this nation to raise money for the organization that my dad helped to co-found, the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. In fact, today, the monies that she raised to do her freedom concerts, where she narrated the story of the movement and sang songs in between, raised a few $1,000,000 in today's terms for the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. But what most people don't know is that my mother was an activist before she met our father. She was a part of the NWHF in college, the Human Relations Committee and the Race Relations Committee at the Antioch College. And she was an early participant in the peace movement. In fact, she was the one who spoke out against the Vietnam War even before our father. And I believe is responsible for him eventually lending his voice to that cause when he spoke out on April 4th, 1967. She was perhaps his first and most important advisor because she had a keen sensitivity and understanding of what it would take to raise the awareness of people in America for the causes of justice, freedom, and equality. And so she encouraged him to speak out against that war. But it was in 1968, when our father was assassinated, that our lives as children drastically changed. For we had grown accustomed to sharing our father with the world. But now we would have to share our mother with the world as well. But we learned to do that. In fact, we have our own little joke that the King Center was really our mother's 5th child. When she founded the center, there were men who told her, stay home. No, you need to stay home and raise your children and leave this work to the men. My grandfather, my father's father, had some choice words that I won't repeat, but you'll fill in the blank. He said, leave her alone. And so she was determined and fearless because it was a part of her DNA to continue the work of our father and to keep the message and the philosophy of nonviolence alive. At the time of his death, he was the most hated man in America. But because of her determination to institutionalize his legacy, that all changed. And today, he is perhaps one of the most loved Americans and even world leaders. And that's because of the work of Coretta Scott King. She knew very early that they were in the midst of something of historic proportions. And so the first speech that he gave as leader of the movement, she could not attend because she was just a few weeks after delivering my sister Yolanda. But she insisted that someone take the taping device to record that message. And because she had that instinct and that keen sense of awareness. We have those words today, as well as so many other words. She also was responsible for collecting and organizing his papers. I often imagine, where would the world be today if those words were not preserved by Coretta Scott King, and if she did not insist that we do something to keep his message alive in America. 1969, there were race riots. A grieving widow, determined not to be overwhelmed in her grief, not to entertain bitterness and anger and hatred, changed the tide of the climate in America at that time. And I believe people took her lead. And so we honor her, and I thank you for honoring her. And I want to leave you with the words that really embedded themselves in her heart, in her mind, and in her spirit when she was a student at Antioch College. On that campus was a statue of the founder, Horace Mann, that great educator. And these words were etched: "Be ashamed to die until you have won some victory for humanity." I think it's safe to say that as I was in that room 50 years later from the bombing, January 30th, 2006, in Mexico, when my mother took her last 3 breaths, she had won several victories for humanity. Thank you, and God bless you.
Dr. King, thank you. Beginning her career at Goodyear Tire and Rubber Company in Gadsden, Alabama in 1979, it is unlikely that Lilly Ledbetter realized she would become the face of equality for an entire nation. As a night supervisor at Goodyear and the only woman in her position, she began her work earning the same pay as her male counterparts. By the end of her career, however, she was earning less than any man performing the same job. Although employees were not allowed to discuss compensation with one another, an anonymous colleague slipped a note to Ledbetter advising her of the differential just before her retirement. Ledbetter filed a complaint with the Equal Employment Opportunities Commission and then initiated a lawsuit alleging pay discrimination under the Equal Pay Act of 1963 and Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. A state jury originally found in Ledbetter's favor, but Goodyear appealed. The decision and the case went all the way to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court ruled 5-4 in favor of Goodyear, not because of the merits of the case, but rather because the complaint was filed more than 180 days from the decision date of the employer. After the court's decision, Ledbetter worked tirelessly for over a decade to secure equal pay for women and men. Her efforts were rewarded when President Obama signed the Lilly Ledbetter Fair Pay Act into law on January 29, 2009. For a crusade that has changed laws and lives, you, Lilly Ledbetter, are now inducted into the National Women's Hall of Fame.
Thank you for this great honor of my induction into the Women's Hall of Fame. What an honor for this Alabama girl. It is an extraordinary honor to be included with this distinguished group of women being inducted into the Women's Hall of Fame. And to Senator Barbara Mikulski, my special champion. There are no words to express how grateful I am for your efforts, Senator Mikulski, on my behalf. I am grateful for your support on the bill that bears my name, and I'm inspired by your continuing commitment to equal rights for everyone. The plan I had sketched out for my life was very simple. I intended to raise a family, work hard, save, build a nest egg, and when time came, I could retire and enjoy the fruits of my labors. That's the way it's supposed to work, isn't it? I wasn't seeking fame or looking to become a household name. I just wanted fairness and a good life. That's not a lot to ask, or so I thought. It should be pretty simple. You hold up your end of the bargain, your employers hold up theirs. Everybody wins, right? My story began in 1979 when Goodyear hired me to work as a supervisor in their tire production plant in Gadsden, Alabama. I wound up working there for 19 years and 10 months, one of the few women holding a supervisor's position. It wasn't easy. In fact, the plant manager said that women shouldn't be working in the factory, that women just made trouble. We wanted to try to fit in. We didn't want to make waves. I just wanted to do a good job. I wound up at the bottom of the list, though, because I would not agree to go down to the local hotel with my boss. So I wound up at the end of the bottom. But when I started at Goodyear, all the managers got the same pay. But then Goodyear switched to a new pay system called pay for performance. After that, people doing the same jobs could get paid differently. Goodyear kept what each one of us got paid very confidential. No one was allowed to talk about it. Some years I got raises, some years I didn't. And I didn't know if the raises I got were good as what my peers were getting. I had no way of knowing. But I did a good job. I even got a top performance award in 1996. I only started to get some hard evidence of what the men were making when someone left me an anonymous note in my mailbox at work. It showed what 3 male managers and myself were getting paid. We 4 had the exact same job. I learned that my salary was $3,727 per month, while the lowest paid male was getting $4,286. And he had a lot less experience than I did. I thought about letting it go. I really gave it some serious thought. I was close to retirement. I thought I'd just let it go, but I just couldn't. For me, it was a basic fairness and of my dignity. As a result, I filed a complaint of discrimination with the EEOC and ultimately sued Goodyear in 1998. In court, Goodyear acknowledged that they were paying me less than the men doing the same job. They said it was because I was a poor performer. My women colleagues, I had 2, they testified for me at trial on my behalf, and the jury didn't believe it either. At trial, the jury came back and found in my favor and gave me an award of $3.8 million. That was the high point of my story. That was the happiest moment. Although at trial, the trial judge agreed that the jury's verdict was amply supported by the evidence at trial, he was forced to reduce the damages award to $300,000. That was all I was entitled to because of damages caps in Title VII, a mere 10% of what the jury had awarded me, and hardly more than a slap on the wrist to accompany the size of Goodyear Tire and Rubber. Goodyear, of course, appealed the entire verdict, and my case eventually ended up in the Supreme Court. On May 29, 2007, I hit a low point. That's when the Supreme Court reversed the judgment and took every dollar, even the 2 years back pay. Justice Alito wrote the opinion. According to him, I should have complained the first time I got a smaller paycheck, even though I didn't know it, even though I had no way to prove it, but I should have complained then. They said I had waited too long to file my charge. The court held that if you don't know about discrimination or can't figure things out right away, the company can treat you like a second-class citizen as long as you work there. This decision completely reversed precedent and set a new rule for pay discrimination claims. That meant that it wasn't just me who had to swallow the consequences of pay discrimination. Every other working woman in America was forced into the same corner. Justice Ginsburg wrote an amazing dissent that hit the nail on the head. She said they do not understand what it's like in the real world. People don't stand around a water cooler discussing their pay, and even if you knew you made a little less than someone else, it might not be discrimination. And you want to try to fit in and do that good job and get along, but the bottom line was that every paycheck I received, I got less than what I was entitled to under the law. That was wrong, not to mention illegal. But the Supreme Court disagreed. I won't lie to you. I was pretty devastated by the court's decision, and in one fell swoop, I lost my case and became the poster child for unequal pay for equal work. But instead of taking it quietly, I decided to fight back. I owed that much not just to myself, but to my daughter and my granddaughter, not to mention all of America's women and girls who deserved a fighting change. The first battle was to correct the Supreme Court's terrible ruling. The pay equity stalwarts in Congress immediately got to work on legislation that would do just that. So began another 18-month journey. I was blessed throughout this fight to have the support of remarkable legislators and to be joined by tenacious advocates who met with members of Congress, sent letters, emails, made phone calls, held briefings and press conferences, and rallied millions of people around the world for this cause. It was an honor and a privilege to work beside them, and I can tell you that these actions matter and our voices do truly make a difference in shaping the law. It wasn't easy at first. The Ledbetter bill passed the House in the 110th Congress, but we didn't have the numbers in the Senate to overcome a filibuster. However, the 2008 elections changed the landscape. The House acted quickly in January of 2009. The Senate took a little longer, but thanks to the indefallible efforts of Senator Mikulski, we finally got even more than the 60 votes we needed to pass the bill. January 29, 2009 was one of the most memorable days of my life as President Obama signed the Lilly Ledbetter Fair Pay Act into law. I felt so many emotions. I was excited to be present for such a historical moment. I was happy that our hard work had finally paid off. But most of all, I felt incredibly grateful to be surrounded by people who care so much, not just for me, but for all women and girls for whom that stroke of the President's pen would mean so much more than a simple signature. The new law is critical, but in reality, it's only brought us to where we were before the ruling of the Supreme Court in my case, women continue to face a persistent wage gap that's not closing nearly fast enough. There are still loopholes in existing laws large enough to drive a truck through. So as I'm thrilled at how far we've come, I am equally certain our work is not done. A point I made at the White House with Mrs. Obama. When I set out on my career in 1979, it wasn't part of my grand plan to someday have my name on a Supreme Court case or an act of Congress. I simply wanted to work hard and support my family. The rest, I believed, would take care of itself. Clearly, fate had other plans for this Alabama girl. After all, I started out as a supervisor in a tire plant. 30 years later, I've been a litigant, an advocate, a lobbyist, an author, and a public speaker. Sometimes life throws us curveballs. We may not have asked for them, we may not have expected them, but we still have to deal with them. After everything that's happened to me, I've come to realize that the true test of a person is not so much what happens to us, but how we react to it. When we see an injustice, do we sit and do nothing, or do we fight back? Each of us, every day, breaks through barriers for women and girls simply because we choose to believe the future can be better. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Congratulations, Lilly Ledbetter. And for the record, I know because I interviewed her yesterday, the tires on her car are Michelin. And mine will be too. A dedicated and lifelong servant of the people, Senator Barbara A. Mikulski continues to successfully represent and advocate on behalf of her constituents, veterans, women, and others. Growing up in a family that understood the importance of community and wanting to make a difference herself, Mikulski began her professional life as a social worker. That work evolved into activism when she organized communities against a plan that called for a 16-lane highway through Baltimore's Fells Point neighborhood. In 1971, Mikulski successfully ran for Baltimore City Council. Then, in 1976, she won a congressional race to represent Maryland's 3rd District, which she did for 10 years. In 1986, Mikulski became the first Democratic female senator elected in her own right and has served as a senator ever since. Senator Mikulski is well known for her legislative efforts on behalf of women, veterans, and students. She is the Dean of Women in the United States Senate and is known for her ability to build coalitions, once saying, "Each one of us can make a difference. Together, we make change." In 2011, Senator Mikulski became the longest serving female senator in United States history. For your trailblazing victories on behalf of people everywhere and for your lifetime of public service, you, Senator Barbara A. Mikulski, are now inducted into the National Women's Hall of Fame.
Good evening, everybody. Haven't you just been awed and inspired by all of these wonderful, wonderful, wonderful speeches? And I am so honored and so deeply touched to also be invited to be joined by the leadership, the membership, and actually nominated by one of my constituents from Annapolis to join the Women's Hall of Fame. I want to thank the leadership and the members, all of you, and all of those who would like to be here but support the Hall of Fame for creating an institution that enables women to be recognized for what they've done, where they've taken a hold of their life, they've taken a hold of their passion, they've taken a hold of the world in which they found them, and just went out and gave it everything they got and made a difference. I am so honored to be part of this. And I'd also like to salute the second wave of the women's movement in the United States of America. The first wave began here, right here in Seneca Falls. The second wave began in a convention in Texas, convened in the 1970s, when we wanted to join the ferment and passion of the change of the times. Civil rights was in the air. Equal rights was on its way. And the leadership, and particularly the political leadership, names that will go down forever in history, but launched a political movement along with our social movement. Names like Bella Abzug, names like Shirley Chisholm, names like Barbara Jordan, Pat Schroeder, just ring throughout the books and throughout our country. And tonight we are gathered here to not only honor the past, but to learn from the past. What can we do now to make our world a better place? Because all of those activists acted in the present of their time and seized the day and understood the power of now. And also we have an obligation to inspire the next generation by the stories we tell. So I'm so proud to be in such a historic place and such a historic opportunity. Seneca Falls is the home of one of the greatest social movements of our time. In 1848, Elizabeth Cady Stanton and Lucretia Mott stood up to meet the challenges of their time. They mobilized, they organized the American women's rights movement. They called for a convention, they called for action, they made history, they changed history, and that revolution keeps on going. And this is what we're here to talk about tonight. When this crowd of 300 men and women came to discuss the social and civil and religious conditions of their time, some came in carriages, some came in wagons, some came on horseback, some came on foot. But no matter how they came, the women who came and the men who joined them would march on the same road to equality. And that march must continue. They debated and they declared something called the Declaration of Sentiments. This was in July. The Declaration of Independence and the words were fresh in their mind. And as they wrote their Declaration of Sentiments, they added 2 words to the Declaration of Independence, which simply said, all men and all women shall be created equal. And when they did, they called for women to secure for themselves the right to vote. For Frederick Douglass, who joined them that day, said from that right, all others would follow. You can read that document on the wall at the Wesleyan Chapel. It was in 1848 a revolution. But that call for the right to vote, for when they say we the people, they just didn't mean half the population. They meant the entire population. And as women fought for years and decades and against great onslaught, the ability to get the vote was transformative in American society. I would not be here today if there were not for 2 constitutional amendments. One, a constitutional amendment that gave the people the right to choose their senator. Up until that amendment, the state legislatures determined who went to the United States Senate. That was a great idea, but an even better idea was giving women the right to vote. Now, to me, I never thought I'd be a historic figure. To me, history was about powdered wigs and crinolines and wearing bonnets, like our esteemed historical speaker. It was about Abigail Adams, who operated from the White House. It was about Jane Addams, who operated out of the Hull House, but certainly not Barb Mikulski from a blue-collar home in Baltimore. But yes, that's when destiny calls. And as Senator Olympia Snowe said during the health care debate, when destiny calls, you don't hang up. And I might add, you don't when the president calls either. When I arrived to the Senate in 1986, I was the first Democratic woman elected in her own right. There had been other Democratic women like Muriel Humphrey, but they had succeeded their husband. I was the first who got there all by herself. But really, not all by myself, because what we know is that when you talk about me and you're elected, there's a whole lot of we that goes into helping somebody like me or any of us get elected. And when I came to the United States Senate, only 15 women in all of American history had served before me. Remember, this was 1986, not 1886. 1986, only 15 women had served. Well, let me tell you how the times have changed. Right now, there are 17 women in the United States Senate. There are more women serving right this minute today, 12 Democrats and 5 Republicans, than had served all in American history when I arrived. So you see, change is on the way. I was honored in this January, when I took my oath of office. I became the longest serving woman in the United States Senate's history. Margaret Chase Smith, who's also a member here, had served for 4 terms. Well, now I join Margaret Chase Smith in the history books. But for me, it's not how long you serve, but how well you serve. And how well you serve is determined by what you do and how you put your values into action. We live in a great country, and I couldn't be here if it were not only in America. My mother and father owned a small neighborhood grocery store in a blue-collar neighborhood, not unlike the communities in Buffalo up the road from here, steel, automobile, and so on. My mother and father worked 70 hours a week so that my sisters and I, one of whom is here today, my sister Fran, my other sister's with me in spirit, so that we could have an education. We had wonderful teachers. We went to Catholic schools. We were educated by the nuns. We learned the 3 R's, reading, writing, and religion. But our religion was about the Beatitudes. We learned something called Matthew 5. Blessed are those who are concerned about the poor, will fight for the justice, and be the peacemakers. And when I grew up in that neighborhood, I never thought I would be a United States Senator, because only in America is that kind of thing possible. And I was in social work and working as a community activist. I thought about going to get my doctorate in public health. And along the way, I found out that the powers that be were going to run a 16-lane highway through these older neighborhoods, take people's homes, not even give them relocation benefits, not even give them the value of the home, but a modest appraised value at the property tax level. They were going to lose everything. I met in a community, in a church, and we said we were going to fight it. We were going to fight City Hall. They laughed at us. They made fun of us. But you know what? In America, when you become a protester, when you become a dissident, they send you to Congress. They don't put you to jail. Many of the greatest things that for many of us up on the stage, or certainly for myself, came out of the fact that what we knew was when people told us no. You can't do this. Why are you doing this? You're just going to cause trouble. Why don't you stay home? Why don't you shut up? Why don't you sit down? Well, you know what? It just didn't work out that way. And as we talked among ourselves, for most of us, the very words that you can't do it and we're saying no became our greatest victory. We fought that highway in Baltimore, and you know what? We won. There are 4 women here from Baltimore this evening. Many of them were the activists in that fight. We not only stopped the highway, but we saved the neighborhoods that became the roots of the Baltimore Renaissance. Saying no means often yes to another opportunity. When I came to the Congress of the United States, guess what I found? And then to the Senate. That when you looked at all the protocols and research that was going on at NIH, women were not included in the protocols of research. The famous study, take an aspirin a day, keep a heart attack away, was done on 10,000 guys, not one woman was included. So we organized, we went to work. I in the Senate, Pat Schroeder, Congresswoman Connie Morella, Olympia Snow, and we went out there when we challenged NIH. And guess what they said? It's just not good science to put women in the protocols. Your hormones present too many biological variables. One doctor wrote in a journal that women had raging hormones and therefore couldn't be considered reliable research subjects. My comment at NIH that day was, my hormones rage because of comments like that. So we just weren't going to take no, and we turned to wonderful scientists and asked them to change their policy. They not only changed their policy, but George Bush the Elder was president, and he appointed Bernadine Healy, of blessed memory, who just died the other day, to be the head of NIH. And we, the women of Congress, joined hands with Dr. Healy, established the Office of Women's Health at NIH, got the money for the famous hormone study, and that hormone study resulted in the change in medical practice. But guess what? Because it did, it lowered breast cancer rates by 15%. So when you say, what did the women in Congress do about health care? We changed the rules of research to include women, and we changed to have an Office of Women's Health. And that change, leaving it to scientists like you heard tonight, resulted in saving lives of women 1 million at a time. That's what we do. And one other story about the power of no. We heard the story of Lilly Ledbetter, and as she fought her way through the courts and was working it through with appeals after appeals after appeals, all of us who were advocates of equal pay knew about the battle of Lilly Ledbetter. But then came the day of the famous Supreme Court decision, and this shows how when women work together, we cannot be stopped. Yes, the Supreme Court decided no, 5-4 against Lilly Ledbetter's appeal. But Justice Ruth Ginsburg took her opinion, her minority opinion, and read from the court itself her dissenting opinion, which in itself was a call to arms. We in the Congress heard that call, and we put in the legislation immediately, the pay equity bill, and we went to work on it. It went in the House, and when we brought it up for the vote in the Senate, we lost. We lost the first time. And as the vote was over and people were going out and they were dejected, once again I heard in, no, what do? Why don't you give up? Put this one aside. Go for something we can win. Can't you water it down? How do you water down equal pay for equal work? Do we give her half a pay and hope it gets equal the next time? And is that compromise? Oh no. So as people were leaving the floor of the United States Senate, I took the mic and said, whoa, you think that we're lost the vote and we're going home. But we're not. Abigail Adams said that you cannot pass laws without the inclusion of the women. And if you do, we will ferment a revolution. I said, this is a revolutionary item here. Equal pay for equal or comparable work. So I said, I am issuing a call of arms to women all over America. Square your shoulders, put your lipstick on, and let's get out there and fight. And Lilly Ledbetter went out and took her cause to the fight. We put in new legislation. It became a campaign item in the presidential election. Barack Obama wins. We immediately put in the Lilly Ledbetter bill, and we're ready to go. And then our dear friend, and it goes to the Health Education Committee, of which I'm a member, but then Senator Kennedy chaired it. You all know what happened right around the inaugural and the time in January when we were all sworn in. Senator Kennedy fell gravely ill. And sitting in my office, I got this call, and it was Ted. And he said, Barbara, the bill is in my committee, but the bill is in my committee, but it's now going to be in your hands. I have to go to get some pretty serious medical treatment. I want you to pick it up and take it on. And I said, I'm doing it. Of course I'll do it. And I took that legislation. We got it through the committee in a matter of days. We had it on the floor in less than a month. When we took it to the floor, they threw 9 amendments at it. Whack, whack, whack. We defeated them all. And then we squared our shoulders. We put our lipstick on. We had the good men with it, because the good men of the Senate show that men of quality never fear, will always work with women who fight for equality. And on that day, we won the Lilly Ledbetter bill. So we could do it, because one woman was willing to fight on her own time and her own dime and put her life on the line. But the rest of us, whether you're a Supreme Court justice, whether you're a member of Congress, whether you were the grassroots organizing, we did that. That is what a revolution is. That's what our social movement means, that we are all in it together, that we take up the causes of our time. The cause for equal pay continues, but now we've got to fight for jobs in our country. We've got to fight to make sure we have a job, and when we get one, that it does pay equal pay for equal work. We have to make sure that we honor our father and our mother. It's not only a great commandment to live by, but it's a great policy to have on our law books so that seniors have Social Security and Medicare in their personal checkbooks. We've got to continue to fight. And we've got to make sure that we end violence around the world. And ending violence, we have to make sure domestic violence in the home, violence around the world, and get rid of the scourge of trafficking of women and children. Women and children should not be sold in commodities to the brothels and the sweatshops of the world. We need to organize for ourselves here and for the powerless around the world. That's what being here means. And so tonight, being here, I'm reminded once again of the founders of our revolution. And I believe it beats in the heart of every single person here, every woman here, and every man here, just the way it did in 1848 in that Wesleyan chapel when they said our movement didn't have a prayer. But you know what? They had a revolution, and it continues today. God bless you all. God bless the country that enables us to organize, speak, and work together. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator Mikulski, and congratulations. A groundbreaking educator and politician, Dr. Donna Shalala has more than 30 years of experience as an accomplished scholar, teacher, and administrator. She has used that knowledge and experience to change the course of people's lives. Dr. Shalala's own life of service began early. In fact, she was one of the country's first Peace Corps volunteers in Iran. After graduating with a PhD from Syracuse University's Maxwell School of Citizenship and Public Affairs, Dr. Shalala pursued a career in higher education. That career eventually led to the presidency of Hunter College and then to the chancellor's position at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. In that position, she became the first woman to lead a Big Ten school. In 1993, Dr. Shalala was appointed United States Secretary of Health and Human Services by President Clinton. She served in that capacity for 8 years and became the longest-serving Secretary of Health and Human Services. During her tenure, Dr. Shalala directed the welfare reform process, raised childhood immunization rates to the highest in our country's history, led major reforms to the FDA's approval process and food safety systems, and much, much more. In 2001, Dr. Shalala became the president of the University of Miami. What is it, Dr. Shalala? Oh, you, okay. I had it upside down. And has led the school to a position as one of the top research universities in the entire country. For a life committed to leadership and learning, you, Dr. Donna Shalala, are now inducted into the National Women's Hall of Fame.
I have no idea what I'm doing here. If I can't stand on Barbara Mikulski's shoulders, at least I can stand on her stool. It's really a great honor and very humbling to share this induction with so many extraordinary women, past and present. I want to thank the National Women's Hall of Fame for a wonderful weekend and, of course, for this spectacular ceremony. I want to thank my friends from New York and Washington and Miami and from the Maxwell School at Syracuse who made their extraordinary effort to be here. We are all here to honor women who made a difference in all our lives. Their voices thunder down the years, and their legacy is alive and thriving today. Their language is part of our lives. Generations have come and gone since, as Barbara described, Lizzie Stanton added those two crucial words to the most hallowed phrase in our history. A newspaper man called that convention at Seneca Falls the most shocking and unnatural incident ever recorded in the history of womanly. But as everyone here knows, the road from Seneca Falls has been long and hard. Many of our feet are sore, and many of us have tired backs. Our hearts are strained. The struggle isn't over yet. We have miles to go before we sleep. Miles to go before our dreams come true. As we celebrate the memory and the meaning of Seneca Falls with the women being honored tonight, we cannot rest or claim victory, not when we have so much to do, so much to lose. Sojourner Truth knew something about the strength of women. She said, if the first woman God ever made was strong enough to turn the world upside down all alone, women together ought to be able to turn it back and get it right side up again. But to turn the world right side up, we have to stay strong. I believe that's the best way to honor the present and the past inductees, to remember how far we've come, to imagine how far we'll go, to appreciate the women who shocked and shaken up every generation everywhere, to keep fighting in their name, in their memory, and never stop struggling until we win. By standing on the shoulders of the leaders of the modern women's movement, I had it easier than earlier generations. I had to work hard, and I had to figure out a way to get around those who would stand in our way. My father, however, was deeply committed to women's education. I even found a letter that he wrote in 1927 when he was quite young to the Cleveland Plain Dealer, arguing for equal opportunities for women. He was the eldest son in a large Lebanese family, but he believed in women's education for my mother and for his twin daughters. I was lucky enough to go to a women's college and never really felt the sting of discrimination until I joined the Peace Corps. My grandmother actually was quite helpful. My family was quite opposed to me going off to some foreign country alone when I graduated from college. My father actually offered me an automobile not to go. But I was determined to heed John Kennedy's call and to go off to the Peace Corps. As I was leaving the house, my grandmother was still arguing with my parents that I should be able to go, and she was arguing that I was only going over to the old country and I would be quite safe. The fact that Iran was pretty far from Lebanon didn't seem to occur to her. However, she handed me a letter as I was leaving the house and said, "Give it to the head man of the village." When I later arrived in Iran and gave the letter to the head man of the village, it turned out that my grandmother, who was quite well educated, had written in classical Arabic. This is to introduce Donna Shalala, the daughter of a great sheikh in Cleveland, Ohio. Please put her under your protection. It was, however, in Iran where I first felt the sting of discrimination. Actually, during our first week of training in Tehran, I jumped into a cab with one of my male colleagues and proceeded to give directions to the taxicab driver. The driver wouldn't even look at me and looked at my male colleague and asked him for directions. My male colleague already had the imprint of the women's movement on him and turned to the man and said, "You have to understand, she has money, I do not, so you better listen to her." That led to a lifelong interest in the role of economic incentives in changing behavior. It was in Iran where I began to understand how African Americans felt in our country and how women who were discriminated against around the world felt when men looked through them and didn't provide the same opportunities. And while we were very successful in Iran in achieving changes in our small village and the small college where we worked, it would lead to a lifelong commitment to the most disadvantaged in the world. From the Peace Corps, I went on to graduate school. And in graduate school, I was lucky enough to go to the Maxwell School, where the academic leaders of that school, all of whom were male, there was one tenured faculty woman, all of whom understood that women deserved the investment and the opportunities because they too would become leaders in our society. And I really am deeply grateful to the opportunities at the Maxwell School and to the male leaders of that institution. When I think of my own career, going from academia to government and back again to the academy, I think of the men who gave me opportunities and of the impact of the women's movement on men in our society. Because at each stage in my career, it was really men who stepped up and gave me opportunities. Yes, I met senior women during my career, many of them part of previous generations, and many of them thought of themselves as queen bees. They felt that women should not have extra opportunities or get extra help, that they should work hard and achieve the way they had. But it was the males who sensed that something special was happening in our society. And whatever it was going to be good for everyone. And so that every critical point in my career, I had a male mentor or a male friend or a male colleague that stepped up and gave me a helping hand. I have never forgotten those opportunities that were provided by those men over a very, very long career, and the impact that we sometimes forget about that the women's movement, particularly the modern women's movement, had on men in our society, and how different the new generation of young men, the college students that I see, are from previous generations, and how much they're demanding opportunities not simply for their wives and sisters and girlfriends, but opportunities for themselves to share in child raising, to share jobs, and to give everyone in our society opportunities. Tonight, I want to honor, though, a special woman. I want to honor my mother, who will celebrate her 100th year this month. She was born in 1911, when women didn't have the right to vote. She went to college during the Depression and cleaned homes so that she could pay for her college education. She went to law school at night, raising a family and teaching during the day. She was a world-class tennis player and still keeps up on the issues of the day. I stand on her shoulders, as well as the women who met here in Seneca Falls, the women you honor tonight. Thank you very much.
Congratulations, Dr. Shalala. Kathrine Switzer has led the way for others to follow, both literally and figuratively. As the first woman to officially enter the revered Boston Marathon, Switzer broke gender barriers and sexist stereotypes. While still a student at Syracuse University, great showing for SU tonight, by the way, where she earned a bachelor's degree from the Newhouse School of Journalism, Kathrine entered the annual Boston Marathon, registered as K. Switzer. During the race, the director of the event realized that K. Switzer was a woman and entered the course in an effort to physically remove her from the race. His attempts were unsuccessful, and she completed the run. The episode was dubbed the Boston Incident and fueled a revolution in athletics at a time when many women felt they were not physically strong enough to run 26.2 miles. Kathrine went on to a formidable career as a runner and perhaps an even more impressive career as an activist, broadcaster, businesswoman, author, speaker, and fitness expert. Working with Avon, Switzer founded the Avon International Running Circuit, creating programs for over 1 million women in 27 countries. The effort of Switzer and Avon culminated in the inaugural Olympic Women's Marathon in 1984. For leading the way to equality in sports, Kathrine Switzer, you are now inducted into the National Women's Hall of Fame.
Thank you. Thank you for that. I'm the last speaker, in case you didn't notice. You've been very, very patient, and it's certainly not been a burden. This has just been unbelievable up here tonight. You know, I know all of you are a little afraid of me as a speaker. Everybody is, because they think I'm going to make you get up and start a jogging program. But I just want to tell you, tonight is not about mileage and about shoes. Tonight is about not just miles and shoes, but it's about empowering women around the world in their millions, changing their lives, changing the world, and seeing incredible potential. But mostly tonight's a story about gratitude. And my first order of gratitude tonight is to thank the National Women's Hall of Fame for inducting me. It's a great, great honor. And it's not even about running in a funny way. It's really about social change. And that's what I'm going to talk about tonight. I also want to thank my nominator, runner Kathy Troisi, who is a legend in Seneca Falls. She's nominated me for 15 years. And I'll tell you, only a very determined marathon runner could last that long. And so, Kathy and the National Women's Hall of Fame, thank you both from the bottom of my heart. I also have a lot of gratitude for my very incredibly supportive family. Some of them are here tonight. Thank you guys for coming. My parents were astonishing role models, but I must tell you, my story really begins with my dad. My dad, who looked at a 12-year-old little girl who was insecure. She wanted to make the field hockey team in her high school, didn't think she could do it, and he said, honey, all you have to do is run a mile a day. And he got out there and showed me how to run a mile a day, and sure, I made the field hockey team. But what my dad didn't realize, and I didn't understand either, was that he empowered me for the rest of my life. Every day I ran, I had a victory under my belt that nobody could take away from me. And 52 years later, I still have that victory under my belt, and it has changed my life, and it has changed millions of women's lives. I have a huge gratitude. Thank you. You know, I used to call it my secret weapon, this empowerment, this victory under my belt. It was my secret weapon. And it allowed me to go into every other avenue of my life with a lot of courage, including the insane desire to be a sports journalist. At age 12 and 13, I wanted to be a sports journalist because I knew I could never be a real athlete, but I thought I could stay close to the sport. So my next order of gratitude is to Syracuse University, where I got the most incredible journalism degree. Absolutely fantastic. Thank you, guys. I've got tables of Syracuse University people over here who are wonderful. Thank you, thank you. But also Syracuse University gave me something else that I'm sure you all don't know about. They gave me the little 52-year-old, skinny, balding, gray university mailman who happened to be an ex-marathon runner. His name was Arnie Briggs. And Arnie Briggs would be out delivering the snow, a working class guy every day of his life, delivering in the snow the mail to the dorms at Syracuse, and invited me to come and train with the men's cross country team every afternoon. And I went out there scared out of my wits, and yet these guys, like Donna said, the guys were wonderful. The guys were supportive. Never, ever in my life have I been around a male runner who wasn't totally supportive and have helped this movement so much. But there was Arnie Briggs, long retired from marathon running, bad Achilles, bad knee, and he would hobble around the course and tell me these stories about the greatest race in the world, the Boston Marathon. The one day in his life when this little working class guy could be the hero, be in the papers, and be the hero in his own life and have a sense of significance that lasted again and again and again and took him through all that snow every year. So when Arnie and I were running one night, I expressed that I too would like to run the Boston Marathon, and he said, but a woman can't run the Boston Marathon. And I said, what do you mean? He said, women don't have the capability of running the Boston Marathon or any marathon. They can't go that far. And I said, we're running 10 miles in a blizzard. How could I not run 26? He said, it's a big difference. Arnie was a product of his time then. He believed the myth that so many people did, men and women, that if a woman ran over a half a mile, which was the longest distance in Olympic competition at the time, that she was, going to get big legs and grow hair on her chest and her uterus was going to fall out. So Arnie was afraid that his running partner was going to get seriously damaged, but I was persistent, and I told him I wasn't going to run with him anymore, and he said, okay, if you prove to me in practice, I'll be the first person to take you to the Boston Marathon. So time went on, and we ran 31 miles one day. I wasn't insecure that 26 wasn't quite enough. Let's do another 5, and Arnie passed out at the end of the workout. And when he came to, he said, women have hidden potential in endurance and stamina. We had discovered an enormous and exciting truth that would change the way the world looked at women's physiology and capability. And he took me to the Boston Marathon. He helped me sign up for the race. You heard how I signed with my initials. That's how I signed my name, and off we went to Boston. So my next order of gratitude tonight is to thank the Boston Marathon, and not the least of which is its longtime, now deceased, but longtime then, crusty Scots race director, a guy by the name of Jock Semple. And when Jock Semple discovered that number 261 in the Boston Marathon was a girl, he lost his temper, he jumped off the press bus, went after me, attacked me physically, screamed at me to get the hell out of his race, and tried to rip my numbers off. Arnie tried to bat him away and said, leave her alone, she's okay, I've trained her. My burly boyfriend, who was an ex-All-American football player, who was only running in the Boston Marathon because if a girl could do it, he could do it, came in very handy, busted Jock Semple and knocked him on the side of the road, and Arnie screamed, run like hell, and down the street we went. People say I was courageous to run the Boston Marathon. I wasn't courageous to start the Boston Marathon, but I was courageous to finish it. It was a very, very difficult situation. I was embarrassed and terrified at the time. But I knew if I didn't finish that race, nobody would believe that women could do it, and it would set us back so far. And for those of you who are runners, the marathon is a diabolical race. You know, you just don't know how it's going to turn out, and anything can happen. And so I had to finish it no matter what. On my hands and my knees, I was determined absolutely to finish that race. But I have to thank Jock Semple. Jock Semple provided the world one of the most galvanizing photos of women's rights, which you saw on the screen tonight. That photo became one of Time Life's 100 photos that changed the world. And I have to thank him for that because the bozo did it in front of the press truck, okay? The other thing I have to thank Jock Semple for is he changed a naive girl into a radicalized woman in one race. As the miles went by, I actually forgave Jock Semple. I realized he was just a man of his time. He was an overworked race director. He tried to protect that Boston Marathon from what he thought were clowns like me. But he also allowed me, over those miles, to think, why aren't other women here? And I suddenly realized other women weren't there because they didn't have the opportunities. And there it was, the seminal moment for me. You know, I knew that I had to create those opportunities. When I finished that race, I felt stronger and more fresher, knowing what my life destiny was going to be. There it was, create the opportunities. If you remember nothing else that I tell you tonight, please remember this, that talent is everywhere. It only deserves an opportunity. Talent is everywhere. Guess what? Jock Semple and I became best friends 5 years later. Amazing. Guess what else? The president of the BAA, the Boston Athletic Association, is here with us tonight. The Boston Athletic Association organizes the venerable Boston Marathon. It's an organization that's 125 years old. And guess what? The president of the BAA, for the first time in 125 years, is a woman. She's right over there, Joanne Flaminio. Yes, Joanne, gonna make history. So fueled with these ideas of how to create opportunities, I have my next order of gratitude has to be to Avon Products, the world's largest cosmetics company and always been the company for women. I had this proposal that I had written and I thought it was a design model for other companies I'd have to visit. I took it to Avon, and even as early as the late 70s, they listened to these ideas of women's running, not even official, you know, in any capacity. And they listened to those ideas and thought they were great, and they hired me. And together we began to champion this new cause and opportunities for women. To cut a long story short, as you heard, amazingly enough, we were in 27 countries with 400 races for over 1 million women. We closed downtown London streets for the first time in history for a sports event. We closed the Golden Gate Bridge for the first time in history for a women's race. We did amazing things. We went into countries, almost all of them had never, ever had a women's only race, much less many countries never even had a women's sports event before. The Philippines, Thailand, Brazil, just amazing, amazing. So that's only the surface of the story. The story, though, is so much bigger. It's about the sense of empowerment and hope and freedom through running that we gave these women. It was just absolutely astonishing. You think of the women in Malaysia, for instance, who were in the races who were Muslim. There were a third of them were Muslim in Kuala Lumpur, and they came out and ran in that 90-degree heat with headscarves and long sleeves and long pants. It was the first time they were ever allowed out in public to do anything like that. Wait. How about the women in Brazil? You know, the head of the Federation of Brazil said the women in our country are never going to come out and run because they're feminine, you know, and they're afraid their uteruses are going to fall out. And 10,000 women showed up for this race. He was quite embarrassed. And many of those women didn't have a pair of shoes. And I'm not talking about Reeboks or Nikes. I am talking about shoes. They were so poor they didn't have shoes. And we'd given them a T-shirt and a medal, and we said they are somebody. And when somebody shows you you are somebody, you are somebody. You are somebody. We changed those women's lives. I could go on from country to country to country, but suffice it to say that with that, the data, the statistics, the power, the numbers, the sheer beautiful performances, the athletic performances, we convinced the Olympic Committee to get the women's marathon in the Olympic Games. And when the first woman came into that Olympic stadium, it wasn't that 90,000 people jumped to their feet and were so excited. It was that 2.2 billion people around the world watched it on television and realized that women were running 26 miles, 385 yards, and that they could do anything. And that suddenly the whole physiology and the capability of what women could do was changed. The world notion was changed because everybody knows how far that distance is. They've ridden a donkey or a bicycle or they've walked it, and they know it's far. 26 miles is far. In case you haven't run it, it's really far. Anyway, the total notions are changed. To me, that moment in the Olympic Games was as profound in the physical sense as giving women the right to vote in 1920. It was the physical equivalent of giving women the right to vote. It was the recognition that they could do anything physically and that they were welcome in the highest order, the Olympic Games, in the longest, most arduous distance. The story is only beginning. The story is only beginning. Just imagine, in my own lifetime, it's really exciting actually to still be participating in a movement that's taking place. It's a phenomenal, phenomenal feeling. We have seen now a social revolution because of running. There are more women runners in North America now than men. There are 53% of all the runners in North America are women. And that trend is now spreading rapidly to Europe. I just got back from Germany. It's quite phenomenal what's happening. These women have refuted all those old myths, and instead of just refuting the myths, they've gone on to prove that women have, like Arnie said, hidden potential in endurance and stamina. They created $1 billion industry in fitness and products. They have transformed charitable giving. The millions and billions of dollars that have been raised through fun runs and walks through women's sports and running has been phenomenal. They created incredible medical improvements through fitness. We know that exercise is the best way to relieve our number one killer, which is heart disease, but basically exercise reduces risks of all major diseases, to say nothing of cracking this obesity epidemic that we're now faced with. Prize money, including those in the marathon, but all other races, have created a new class of woman, a professional woman runner athlete. These women are changing the economic structures of their societies, in Ukraine and Russia in particular, but probably most profoundly in Kenya. East Africa now, the women runners are absolutely phenomenal, and they're taking that prize money back to their villages, where they're sanitizing the water, digging wells, building schools, inoculating kids. Anybody here who's ever been in Africa and you've seen the status of women, and even in Kenya, which is so progressive, women are still married at underage at 12 and 13, sold off for cattle, traded for husbands. A terrible situation, and yet these women runners are coming back with that prize money. They're changing the villages, they're changing the farms, they're changing the schools. They're changing everything. They're changing the whole social fabric. They're getting into politics now. Wow, that's going to make the big difference. As that social fabric changes, all those lives are going to change, and that's going to spread. Women are also, through running, pushing back the aging barrier. I'm meeting women who are 65, 70, 75 years old who are only beginning to run, and they're showing us that fitness can come at any age. The body always, always gets better and adapts. But it sounds so great. There's still a huge, long way to go, a huge way to go. About 130 years ago, Susan B. Anthony said the greatest emancipator of women in the world was the invention of the bicycle. You know that? She says the invention of the bicycle because it showed the strength and the fitness of the woman and her independent travel. Now, how can we take running, which already has changed and empowered so many lives, and is much cheaper, much more accessible, much easier to do and to organize, and take it to other impoverished and downtrodden areas for women, and show them how they too can have their lives changed? And I'm thinking particularly of places we consider impossible places, which we've talked about up here, places like India, places like the other parts of Africa, which we've not reached, places like the Mideast, which need empowerment the most. Think about it. I throw that challenge out to all of you for the future. And as I throw this challenge out in closing, I have just 2 last gratitudes. The first of those is to my husband, Roger Robinson, the great love of my life, who shares my beliefs and my passions and is always wonderful and entertaining. Thank you. And also, I want to share this gratitude with my fellow inductees. You all are unbelievable. And also all of those that have preceded us. We stand on the shoulders of these giants, and they have allowed us to go to the next level to achieve. I think it is our duty as inductees, our duty to pass on everything that we have learned and everything that we have done to the next generation, some of you who are here, young women, young girls, to go fearlessly forward and take up the next challenge. So I ask, if these changes have taken place in my life in just the last 45 years, what changes can you make in your own lifetime? It might be as simple as putting one foot in front of the other. Go for it. Thank you. Thank you.
Well, anyone who knows me knows I'm a crier, and I can't believe I didn't bring a Kleenex up here. Excuse me. What a truly inspiring and memorable weekend this has been. Congratulations to our inductees once again. And many, many thanks to our sponsors, to our board members, to our tireless staff, and to you, our attendees. Just as this year's 11 inductees have shown their light in our world and in our lives, our wish for everyone here tonight is that you take your light into the world and let it shine. Please stand and join me once again in congratulating the National Women's Hall of Fame 2011 inductees.